Welcome back to our series. In our last episode, we explored how Nigeria's colonial past laid the groundwork for corruption, but the story doesn't end there. After gaining independence in 1960, Nigeria was full of hope, but also deep divisions. The young nation stumbled through political instability, ethnic tensions, and a devastating civil war. It was a time of crisis, and in times of crisis, people often look for a strong hand to restore order. That strong hand came in the form of the military. The soldiers marched in, promising stability, unity, and an end to the chaos of civilian politics. They presented themselves as saviors, a disciplined force that could fix a broken nation. And for many exhausted Nigerians, this promise was appealing. But what started as a temporary solution would stretch for decades, fundamentally reshaping Nigeria's political DNA. The military didn't just rule, it rewired the entire system of governance. It introduced a new political culture, one that would have lasting consequences long after the soldiers returned to the barracks. This is the story of how military rule, in its quest for order, created an environment where power became absolute and transparency disappeared, setting the stage for corruption on an unimaginable scale. So how did this happen? Let's start with the most immediate change, the centralization of power. When the military takes over, the first things to go are the democratic institutions. The Constitution was suspended. Parliament, the very place for public debate and lawmaking, was dissolved. The checks and balances that are supposed to keep power from being abused were dismantled, piece by piece. In their place, the military ruled by decree. A decree is a law made by a single person or a small council, with no debate, no public input, and no real opposition. The Supreme Military Council, led by the head of state, became the all-powerful legislative and executive body. Power that was once spread across a federal system, with regional and local governments having their own say, was now pulled into the center, concentrated in the hands of a few military leaders in Lagos, and later, Abuja. Think about it. One day, you have elected representatives arguing over laws. The next, you have a general signing a piece of paper that becomes law overnight. Decisions could be made quickly, and that was part of the appeal. Need a new bridge? Decree. Need to change a state policy? Decree. It seemed efficient. But this efficiency came at a massive cost. There was no one to question these decisions. The judiciary, which is meant to be an independent check on power, found its authority severely limited. Courts were often barred from challenging military decrees. This created a system where the rulers were not accountable to the people or to any independent body. They were accountable only to themselves and the military hierarchy. When you concentrate so much power in the hands of so few, without any meaningful oversight, you create the perfect breeding ground for corruption. It's a simple formula, really. Absolute power, without transparency, opens the door for absolute abuse. The very structure of military governance was tailor-made for it. Decisions worth millions, even billions, were made behind closed doors by a small group of individuals who answered to no one. The promise of order had been delivered, but it was the order of the barracks, not the order of a free and open society. Now, let's talk about the culture of secrecy that became the standard operating procedure. If centralization of power was the structure, secrecy was the atmosphere it breathed. Military operations, by their very nature, are often shrouded in secrecy for national security reasons. But when the military becomes the government, that secrecy extends to every aspect of public life. Governance itself becomes a classified operation. Budgets, which in a democracy are public documents debated and scrutinized by parliament and the press, suddenly became state secrets. How much money was the government earning? How was it being spent? Who was getting the contracts to build roads, schools, and hospitals? These were no longer questions the public had a right to ask. The answers were hidden away in files stamped classified. Government contracts, a major source of public spending, were awarded without open bidding. Instead of a transparent process where the most qualified company gets the job at the best price, contracts were often handed out to friends, family, or associates of those in power. It was a system of patronage, hidden from public view. This opaqueness meant there was no way to know if the country was getting value for its money, or if the funds were simply being diverted into private pockets. Accountability became an internal affair. If a military officer was accused of corruption, any investigation would be handled by the military itself. There was no independent anti-corruption agency, no free press able to investigate without fear, and no parliamentary committee to hold hearings. It was the institution investigating itself, and you can guess how that usually turned out. This wasn't just a temporary measure for a time of crisis. This went on for years, for decades. An entire generation of Nigerians grew up under a system where it was normal for the government to be secretive. The idea that citizens have a right to know how their country is being run began to fade. Secrecy became institutionalized. It wasn't the exception, it was the rule. This shift in mindset was one of the most damaging legacies of military rule. It created a deep-seated distrust between the people and the government, a feeling that those in power were hiding something, because they usually were. This culture of secrecy would prove incredibly difficult to dismantle, even after the return to democracy. With power centralized and secrecy normalized, the next logical consequence was the weakening of our public institutions. Institutions are the pillars of a functional state. The civil service, the judiciary, the police, the universities, these are the bodies that are supposed to run the country based on rules, procedures, and laws, not on the whims of a single leader. They are meant to be impartial and professional. But under military rule, these institutions were systematically undermined. The civil service, once known for its professionalism and merit-based system, was politicized. Promotions and appointments were no longer based solely on qualification, but on loyalty to the ruling regime. Civil servants learned that to survive and thrive, they had to please their military bosses, not follow the rulebook. The rules could be bent or ignored for those with connections to power. This created a culture of anything goes for the powerful, while the average citizen was still held to the letter of the law. The judiciary, as we mentioned, lost much of its independence. Judges who dared to rule against the government could be ignored, intimidated, or removed. The message was clear: the law is what the head of state says it is. This eroded public faith in the justice system. If you couldn't get a fair hearing in court because the system was tilted in favor of the powerful, where could you turn for justice? Even universities, which should be centers of free thought and critical inquiry, were not spared. Academics and student activists who criticized the government were often suppressed. The institutions that were supposed to serve the public and uphold the rule of law were gradually hollowed out, becoming shells of their former selves. They became dependent on the military. Their authority derived not from the Constitution or the people, but from the goodwill of the ruling generals. When Nigeria finally transitioned back to democracy in 1999, it inherited these weakened institutions. It was like getting a car back that had been driven recklessly for years. The engine was damaged, the frame was bent, and the steering was unreliable. The new democratic government had the right ideals, but the machinery of state it had to work with was broken. The civil servants were accustomed to a culture of patronage, not public service. The police were more used to serving the state than protecting the people. The judiciary was struggling to regain its independence and public trust. Rebuilding these institutions would be a monumental task, and in many ways, it's a task that Nigeria is still grappling with today. So, let's put it all together. The military came to power promising to end corruption and restore order. But the very nature of their rule, absolute power, no accountability, and total secrecy, created the perfect storm for corruption to flourish on an unprecedented scale. They didn't invent corruption in Nigeria, not at all. The seeds were already there, as we saw in our first episode. But military rule acted like a fertilizer. It took the existing problem and made it systemic. It normalized it. It created a system where grabbing public funds wasn't just an act of individual greed, but a feature of the governance structure itself. It taught a generation of leaders that power was a tool for personal enrichment, not public service. The lines between the state's treasury and personal bank accounts became hopelessly blurred. And this entire system, this well-oiled machine of extraction, was about to be flooded with a resource that would amplify its effects 1,000 times over: oil. The discovery of massive oil wealth in the 1970s coincided with the peak of military rule. What happens when a government built on secrecy and absolute power suddenly gets access to billions of dollars in oil revenue? That is the question we will be tackling in episode 3. It's a story of incredible wealth, missed opportunities, and how the oil boom became a curse that would entrench corruption for decades to come. Thank you for watching. If you're finding this series valuable, please make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode. We'll see you then.